It's official. Hello, everyone. I am Jen Bauer. I'm a business analyst and an API testing specialist at Grant Street, and I am giving you guys an overview of Intro to API Testing. So we're going to do some testing with Postman. We're going to play a little bit. Of course, please follow along with what I'm talking about here by installing the Postman app locally. You can just Google Postman. You'll find a link for it right away. But yeah, we'll get started here. So I'm going to go through a little bit of the things that I'm hoping to cover in this session. We're going to talk a little bit about some terms that are commonly used both in the testing world and in the Postman world. Then we're going to play with some APIs, and hopefully you guys will enjoy making some requests, and you can poke around at things, make copies of things, change things, all of that, and get a little more familiar. And then I will take your questions and share with you some reference material, and we will take it from there. So the two pieces of required materials for this session are the Postman app. You can download it. There is also a version that you can use in the browser. You can just use your, if you have a Google account, you can quickly authenticate and get into the browser that way. I definitely recommend the local Postman app. I just prefer it, especially for having that separation of browser and Postman while you're doing all sorts of fun things. And this is the link for the Women Who Code Greenville API training shared workspace that I'm going to be referencing throughout the session. All right, so let's talk about some of the things I'm hoping we get to go through today and that you will feel good about. So I want to make sure that you get acclimated to using the Postman app, poking around, getting used to where some different things are, so you have some comfort with it by the time that we're done today. We're going to send a few requests, at least, hopefully many more than that, but you'll at least be already interacting with the APIs and getting used to what that looks like. We're also going to make some assertions and actually test some things with these APIs. So when we go through that, you'll be able to see both the things that you send and the things that they are verified against to see if it's a pass or a fail result. And then finally, I'm going to show you, of course, some places to explore and go next to learn more so that you can continue your API learning adventure. All right, so many terms. Hopefully it's not too many terms, but there are a couple of things that are common that I do want to talk about here before we get started. So I want to talk about request types. I'm going to flip over here to Postman. So we're going to talk a little bit about what type of request you can have. So you can go into any of these folders here. I'm just going to go into the top one, which is called ageify.io. I'm going to take a look at this first request here, which is predict the name's age with a parameter here. So when you click into one of these objects here on this left-hand side, these are all of your different requests, and the requests can be nestled under these larger folders that are called collections. So a collection can have subfolders, but it's important to note that this grouping of requests can have some logic around it so that you can have logic that applies to things at that collection level. So we're just taking a look here at this particular request. I have a drop down right here next to the URL for this API. And it has all sorts of different request options. So this is something that you want to keep in mind depending on the API that you're working with, whether you're expecting to get, very logical or unique information back with a GET, or if you're just sending data out and hoping that it's successful. There are also many other types of requests that you can do, but mostly what we're going to be doing today are GET and POST requests. So we've got at least one field down, right? So many other fields left to go in Postman. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these other aspects of a request here. So let's go ahead and switch back to Postman. So when we're looking at a request, we have all of these. Essentially, these are tabbed areas within the request to get some more detail and more context. So params is short for, as you can gather, parameters. And within an API request, which is this URL, you can send some additional context through this key value pair of a name. And in this case, I'm sending Jen, right? But it could be anything depending on what your API is looking for. This is just one of many ways that you can send data to an API to get something interesting back, something that, you know, hopefully logically you couldn't have otherwise gotten. So this Ageify API is all about guessing how old you are based on your name. So we can put all sorts of different fun names in here, but I've just got mine in here as an example. So that's just telling you a little bit about the parameters tab here. Now, this authorization, this could be any sort of, it could be like a username and a password. It could be a token that you get from a token service. There's all sorts of different types of authorizations. For almost all the examples I have here, I think actually it is all, they have no authorization whatsoever. They are super public. They're just like ready to rock and roll for whoever wants to access it. But if we were to look into other APIs that, like, you know, other, you know, companies or applications have, most of them do have some sort of a way that you as a developer can sign up for a key or something that you can use with this authorization setting so that you can have access to the API, and they can kind of monitor your usage too and make sure that you're not abusing it or anything like that. But for most of our examples today, I don't think anything has any authorization. So the headers and the body are, it's good to think about these kind of as different ways that we are sending information to that API for whatever it is that we want to request. So headers are essentially another way that you can provide context and detail about your particular request. You might want to tell it that there's a particular type of a format of response that you want to get back. You really want to get it back in XML. I really only want JSON. There's one of many things that you could specify under the headers. Again, a lot of these examples are super simple. They're just sending back JSON or XML or, you know, pretty basic things. So there's not a whole lot going on in the headers, but more advanced APIs would have that. Now, the body is typically a bit more exciting. In this particular case, this API is only accepting the params, so the body is actually empty, which is sad and not nearly as exciting as we like. But when we get to other examples, you'll have a lot more action going on here. All right, so those are some of the main areas of the request that I wanted to share with you so you can get to these pretty easily. This HTTP response status code, let's take a look at that. So if you are in Postman, go ahead and hit the send button. Get ready to rock and roll. And let's see, when we hit the send button here, I have, for me sending the name of Jen, I have that the guess here is that my age is 31. And there are apparently 8,500 people who have made this request before me. Hey, Jen. That's what the count is for. So hey, Jen. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
Maybe it's just me, but I can't hit send. So I have to create a fork, I guess.
Yeah, I got the same thing.
Yeah, go ahead and that's a good point. I made it
public. It's working for me.
Yeah, if it will not let you do it, I apologize for that.
Did you create it? That's okay, Carmen. Did you create a fork?
No, I copied the link and pasted it into my local Postman that I have downloaded on my machine.
Yeah, no problem. Let me show you guys real quick how to do that.
I can, yeah, I guess so, but I'll do the creative fork thing. It's just saying requests can't be sent in public workspaces right now, though we're working on that for a future release.
Oh, how rude.
But it does say you can fork it. So I'm going to fork it and call it the same thing. If anybody else ran into that, I didn't want to
yeah, no, thank you so much for calling that out. But yes, it is just that. It is exactly that simple, though. You create a fork, and then what will happen is in your workspaces drop down up here, you'll have my workspace, and you should have a copy of it, or it may even give you the option to just make fork it into like another workspace. So I just throw things into my workspace, and that should work for you guys. Yeah, that's a great call out. Thank you for that. That's a shame that it doesn't let you just edit it from the. Just mess around right from the public space, but yes.
Oh my gosh, this is making me mad. How about I created a fork and it's still
won't let you do it?
I don't know why. Yeah, it's the same. Hold on, I'm gonna try something.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. It was still, this showed, sorry, this just may come up for somebody else, so I'll just explain what happened. I was already signed in. I
Mhm.
clicked into this in the browser. So it showed up in my workspaces locally, but then when I forked it, it showed up under my workspaces. So it
Yes.
showed up twice. That's all. Anyway, it's just
Yes.
me.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'll remember that you were recently in the public one, but you're going to want to actually do your playing and messing with it in your copy in my workspace. That's absolutely right. All right. But yeah, I hope that everybody's got a copy of this, is hit and send. And also you're welcome to go into the parameters and put in a different name. Like I'm going to put in my husband's name to pick on him and see what it comes up for Tim. Oh no, it thinks he's 55 years old. I can't wait to tell him his birthday is coming up. So this will hit real hard. That's fantastic. No, he's in his 30s, but that's all right. But yeah, absolutely. We can just keep changing this and seeing what some other values are. But just to get you an idea, aside from this body right here giving us a response, and this doesn't have any error messages or anything that's obviously wrong. So another way that you can tell that everything that's coming back is nice and happy is this 200 OK right here. So Postman loves to provide lots of little hints and context clues here. So 200 is just letting you know it's a successful HTTP request, letting you know that everything's happy. So there's essentially 3 broad ranges of HTTP request ranges. So in the 200s means usually everything's golden. There's a couple of variations on 200 that you could get. 400 range typically means that you or we sent something incorrect to the API. We could have missed a comma or a quote or something like that, or just added an entirely different field that the API wasn't expecting. But essentially 400 means that there's something about the way the request was constructed that's not quite right, and you need to take a look at it and try to figure it out again. A 500 means that whatever you've sent has made the API gods angry. Whatever that application is, it does not understand how to handle the information you have sent it, and something is wrong essentially on the application side. So it's good to keep these things in mind, because you can make tests that check for different scenarios where you could get any of those 3 types of errors. But you want to keep your eye out essentially over here. If you're not sure of how things are going, you can take a look and get some information that way. All right, so that was some API terms. You guys have any questions before I go on to some QA terms? Cool. All right, silence is golden, so I'm going to keep on scooting here. So I want to talk a little bit about the QA side, because this is about API testing. You can actually do a lot of things with Postman outside of testing, including development. In the near future, they're going to hook up your API work with repositories. Postman's going places. So there are a lot of other capabilities that you can do. For me, as a business analyst, somebody who's like creating new features for software and designing that and trying to work through that, I am testing things very often, every single day. So that's the capabilities that I am most familiar with in my wheelhouse. The things that we want to think about in terms of testing is the term for a test is also like an assertion. So you'll see that there is actually a tab here that's called tests. And this first request doesn't have any. It's boring. It's got nothing going on. So I'm going to take a look and see if I can find, let's see if there's another. Let's see if I have another one here. So I have in the National Weather Service, the second request down of returning a grid from latitude, longitude. Got a lot of things going on here. But essentially, what this boils down to is some JavaScript. Who doesn't love some JavaScript? I know a lot of you don't, but if you can bear with it, the JavaScript is usually very straightforward for setting up a test or an assertion. So the format that you may see it in is this PM or Postman library.test, and then you're essentially verifying what something is compared to something else. Now, these particular tests that I have here are simply always going to be true because they have no comparison logic in there. So that's also something that you can do depending on the types of things that you want to check for. You may just always want to have a result in a very accessible spot, and as opposed to you scanning over the response body and trying to dig out pieces of information that you want. there are a couple of different ways that you could, use these test assertions as well to do like a true or a false. I can hit send on this. And actually, if you are forking out this particular collection, it may not work for you without this sample environment. So you may need to go ahead and get that as well, but don't worry about that just yet. I just am only here to talk about tests, and I will get into a little bit of what that is in just a minute here. Let's go. All right, so that's just talking a little bit about assertions. I have these 3 different types of testing here, and we don't need to go into it in detail, but I just wanted to give you an idea of like some of the lay of the land and things that Postman is in particular very good for. Integration testing, of course, because we're talking about APIs, and typically an API means there's one system talking to another. So this is something that is excellent for Postman to help you test with. If you have an idea of what the request would be that first app would send to the second, you can just plug that in manually and go ahead and get your response and imitate that other app. But there's all sorts of ways that you can do that sort of testing and use Postman to monitor and make sure that you're getting the results you expect. The other 2 types are actually something that I do a lot more often. Functional testing is essentially just me verifying that the logic of a particular endpoint is functioning the way I expect. So in the case of our beautiful Ageify, where we are apparently making fun of my husband and any other friend's name I can think of in the moment, one test would be if I knew that it could only, receive a name value, then I might say, well, what happens if I send something ridiculous like name 2? Okay, this is good. This is the behavior I expect, is that it should be mad and it should tell me that there's something incorrect about the format of my test. So this is like, a very simple test that you could do that just verifies that everything works as you intend it to. Regression testing is typically more about after you've had many changes happen over time, possibly in other areas of the API or other areas of your apps, that core functionality is still working as you expect. So it could be possible that you have, a change to your name list. Maybe you start adding, dog and cat names or pet names and things like that, and you want to make sure that that works. So that would be, another kind of test that you could do. In fact, for the work that I do a lot of automated testing, and that is essentially my way of going through regression testing and just verifying that a lot of really key features keep working over and over despite lots of different development changes. All right, so we've got some Postman terms. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what these terms mean in the world of Postman, because the world of Postman is a little different than every other development world. I want to talk about variables in particular, because you're going to hear about these happening at different levels. So it's good to have an idea of what we're talking about here in this particular case. The 5 levels that we had there were local, we had data, we had the collection level, we had the global level, and there's probably one more I'm not thinking of there. Yeah. Environment level. There we go. So there are different areas where you could possibly store that variable data and have it have a different scope, right? Variable scope is such a big deal depending on what you're doing and where you intend for those values to come from. And essentially you can have local variables that are just per request. So you set it just for this request. You might set it in what's called this pre-request script, and just say, hey, I'm going to set a name equal to Lucky, or let's go to another request in here. Here's a great one. So if you go to the place kitten folder, you have get a kitten with variables here. And right here in the pre-request script, I have some variables that are set for the width and height of a kitten. These are essentially just the 2 pieces of the URL, that it receives. And I'm just setting it at this level for this request. So if I went to another request, it would have no idea what's going on with these variables at all. And of course, I'm going to send it because who doesn't want to see a kitten? It's great. So if you ever just need a picture of a kitten at specific sizes, this is the API for you. But yes, you can essentially set your variables at this point right here within this pre-request script. And by using this pm.variables.set, it's setting it at that particular scope that's just for that request. Now, let's say we have things that we want to reuse a bit more, across a lot of different requests that we have coming up. Another way to do that is exceptionally helpful is what's called an environment. So if you're in the shared workspace, you can go up to sample environment, and then it actually may show by default no environment, but you should have an option here in this drop down to go between no environment and sample environment. And if you click this icon right here, we can take a look at what these variables are set to. Environment variables can have, aside from the variable name, you can have an initial value or a current value. Initial value can be the default that you set for everybody. So in this case of the artist ID, I have set that value. For anybody who comes and takes a look at this, can come and see that. And then this current value is what I have locally just for me. So current value is very helpful if, say, you have like a developer key or a password or something that you don't want shared with everyone who's working with you in this space. Then you want to set that as just the current value. But if there are pieces that you do want to share with other people, then you want to set that as this initial value so that they get that. So you should have that artist ID, and then I'll save this, and hopefully it's going to get you these other values as well, but don't worry if it doesn't, because we'll just pop in numbers later as needed. So that is your environment right there. And if you're wondering, how do we reference an environment variable? It's pretty much the same way we do these other variables. This kitten width or kitten height could have been in the environment, or they could have been in the pre-request script. Latitude and longitude here that I have are actually part of this environment. So they would actually grab the values from here. Another way that you can set variables to have a specific context is, we were talking about this collection earlier, that these different groupings are called a collection in the Postman world. You can also set variable values at this level. So maybe there's certain variables that you only want to have within that collection of requests, and you can set that here as well. You could also have tests that always run for all of the requests. It'll run after all of its own tests. If there's just things that you always want it to test for, you can do that. You can also have some JavaScript if you want to set up some tests in a certain way each time. And it's the same for the authorization as well. You can do that at this level as well. The other level that we'll talk about a little bit more detail in a bit is iteration data, or the data level. You can have a CSV file or a JSON file, and you can load that up with some sort of data that you want to iterate over and over on the request in your collection. So maybe there are things that you want to test with, a different set of variables each time. You could totally do that through iteration data. So that gets you a lot of the scopes here. The final and the biggest scope is called global variables. So this can apply regardless of the environment you have selected, regardless of the collection you're in, regardless of the request you send. This is the big daddy of variable scopes. So if there's something that you just want to apply to absolutely everybody, you can set that here. All right. Do you guys have any questions before I go on to a couple more things?
I don't have any questions, but you are giving us nuggets of gold here. We're all like stuff. Like, I'm ready to go change some things in my work Postman right now.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm so glad. Good. That's wonderful to hear. We're not even done yet. We didn't even get to all the examples yet. So that's fantastic. I'm glad to get you a head start here. All right, so we were talking a little bit about this iteration data. I'm going to show you some examples, real simple ones, guys. Like, don't worry, this is not, anything terribly advanced. But I do have a collection that looks up recipes for various alcoholic beverages, and I have two different iteration data files. You can copy this or just write it into a CSV file, or you can, paste this into an empty JSON file. They're essentially the same thing, saying I have two things named that are related to a drink name. I have a margarita and I have a gin and tonic, and I would like to iterate on that particular data. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how I would do that. I have in this folder here the cocktail DB, and I have all these different fun requests. So there's plenty of things to play with here. But I have a search by name, and I have it here set to drink name, right? So you guys can see this beautiful URL for the cocktail DB. It's got the search and it's ready. It's got one parameter. We're going to search for a drink name. That's all we do for this particular endpoint. But maybe I want to search for more than one. So here's how I set up this drink name to connect from this URL and this variable that I have, and it'll connect all the way to an iteration data file. I do it through this little connective piece right here in the pre-request script that's called pm.iterationData. And I want it to look for, in whatever file I load up to it, this drink name. If it's null, go ahead and just hit me with a rum and coke. If it is not null, please go ahead and return whatever the actual value is. And we will go ahead and run it for that. So I can hit send right now and run it without any sort of iteration data file. It has no idea what I have on my desktop, has none of that context. And I can take a look here and see under drinks that it should have here the rum and coke. I'm going to scroll down a little further here. Oh, it's got some other ones here too. Optional alcohol. Let's see. I might have returned some other things that are a little bit different here. So if you're ever curious about what you've sent and to verify that the things that you sent are what you intended, which they might not be for me in this example, but we'll find out. There's this little icon over here that says code, and it lets you know what has been sent. Ah, okay. So it actually did just send drink name rather than the particular the substitution that I was looking for here with my variable being set. Aha, how dastardly. You've ignored my code here. How unpleasant. So we'll have to figure out why that is. It looks like drink name. It looks like I've got it spelled correctly. So it has no iteration data though, so that might be the reason why it's saying if it's not null, go ahead and do this. If it's null, do that. So I'm not quite sure why this particular piece isn't working because it's pretty straightforward, but that's okay. We're going to figure it out with an iteration data file and see if it behaves any better like it did earlier. Oh, well. So we're going to do this option here called run collection. And then what we will do, hold on a second here. There we are. So run collection, you'll see it has the play button here. I'm going to deselect everything and only select the one request that I'd like to do this for. I have an option here for select file, and I'm going to do save responses in case we want to poke around at the things that we get back. Now at select file, I'm going to go to the desktop, and I have a CSV ready, and I have a JSON file ready. Now remember, these essentially have the same thing. They're just in a different format, but they both essentially just have two drinks that we want to look up. Now, when I've opened this up, iterations kicked up from 1 to 2. So I already know that it's interpreted this CSV file correctly. This is a great thing to double check for when you've loaded something up and you think it's going to work the way you hope it will. Just seeing the number actually change is a really great indicator. All right, we're going to run it. Ah, fantastic. All right, somebody's listening to me. So this worked out just fine. So I have a test in here that passed whatever the iteration data file variable value was. And it looks like it found my margarita and it found my gin and tonic. And what I can do here is I can look at my request body. Oh, why are you saying it's unavailable? All right, it's being naughty right now, but normally you can see the things that you've sent. But we can go to response body to see what we got back, and you can actually see the entire body here. Now, what I've done is made some tests to bring back just pieces that are important to me. I wanted to know if it was alcoholic or not. I wanted to know what I had sent earlier, pieces like that. We could also return like the instructions, any part of this you can parse however you like. You could also, depending on the complexity of your test, and this is what I do a lot, I will take pieces from a response, parse them, and then set them to an environment variable or something else to go ahead and reuse them for a follow-up request. That is where I think the magic can be in Postman, and doing lots of more complicated flows is your ability to put them in order sequentially and have them have that logic from the previous request so that you could verify, like, you know, a business workflow or something else that is a more realistic scenario. But this is just the beginning with just 2 requests looking up 2 different drinks here. All right. Do you guys have any questions on what I've shown you so far? Okay, cool. I'll keep trucking.
Carmen says something in German. So there's that.
All the words were in German just a minute ago.
Oh, really? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was in German.
Yeah, I have no idea. I'm gonna take a look here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Bauer.
So I have instructions ES and instructions DE.
Mhm.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's curious indeed. I wonder if there might be another parameter that you can send that has a language. No, it just returns it in multiple languages. Look at that.
That's cool.
Oh, that's wild. Well, now you know, if you have international friends, you can impress them with your ability to get them a drink recipe. should that need ever arise, you guys are good to go. That's too funny. I never noticed that before. That's great. The last piece that I'm going to show you here is called snippets. So I'm going to take a look at this first Ageify. I'm just picking on this because it's at the very top of the collection here. And I don't have any tests in it at all. And let's pretend I suddenly have forgotten all of JavaScript and I don't remember how to write a darn thing. I'm just not in the mood and I can't figure that out, right? Well, the good news is you have this option here. It's this little arrow. It may or may not be expanded when you pop into an empty task. Usually it is expanded for me, but just in case that behavior has something else going on. And what these snippets are is they will just bring in for you some pre-cooked up JavaScript so that you can use that for whatever you need. So it's got setting and getting at all sorts of different levels of variables, for example, all the different guys I was just telling you all about. You can get them and set them. It's got all of those snippets right here. So you can just grab it and go. If for some reason you're just not thinking about it at the moment or don't want to do a Google search. Some of the really good ones that are very helpful here are looking for a particular status code, like is it a 200? That's a very common one, just to make sure your requests are healthy if you're just getting started. One that I do often is just looking for some text, right? Maybe we're looking for our German instructions or whatever it may be. But you can do a straight text search, or you could actually navigate like the body of like a JSON request and go node by node into whatever it is that you're looking for. So you have a lot of options here, but these snippets are really great for just getting going like really fast. This is my beloved right here. Beautiful variable JSON data equaling the JSON response. Right there, that's my bread and butter. So there's plenty of little examples in here that you can reuse. And it's just very helpful for getting started quickly. So we'll do, let's see, instruction. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit send on this. And actually, no, oh, this is the name one, right? So I can do, let's see, the word count maybe. And you can do all kinds of different things that you want to happen. So immediately it already knows the status code is good, body matches a string, but maybe whatever I'm looking for here, this test name for this particular JSON data value, which I haven't set any of this to equal anything, so it's going to definitely fail. But you can make this, you know, as complicated or as uncomplicated as you want, depending on what you'd like to test. All right, so let's go through some of these examples and take a look at some of the things that we have here to give you some ideas. So we were already looking at Place Kitten, which is just a brilliant name. I love this. So in the first request in the Place Kitten API here, after this URL, this domain name, all you're doing is adding in whatever it is you want for the height and the width, and it will find a kitten of that size for you to enjoy the image of. So we can make this 400 by 500. We've got it with slightly bigger image. Maybe we want something really small for, I don't know, something in Slack, who knows? But I've got a tiny image right here. So we know exactly what we're playing with in this particular example. And that's why we're able to set variables for those two different values, and we can do exactly the same thing. And we can just modify it in the JavaScript of the pre-request versus actually changing the URL over and over again. So I always recommend, when you can, setting variables as opposed to modifying the URL directly, because this helps everyone you're working with understand exactly what you're changing in the URL and what the context is of that if they're not familiar. So that can be very helpful. So that's Place Kitten. All right, before I move on to Place Kitten, I haven't asked in a minute, so I'm just going to check. Are there any questions before I keep on trucking?
No, this is just amazing. I just
Yeah.
had to put that in there.
I'm so glad. So the term that I use at work that makes me a big nerd is I say, please let me know if there's a Postman party going on anywhere. Please always invite me. So whenever folks have Postman issues, I'm like, please reach out to me. I'm down for a Postman party anytime. So this is just an extension of a Postman party to me. So I'm glad to share it with you guys. The next request group that I want to show you guys is the audio DB. And I have 3 requests in here, and I have just a little bit of smarts going on to go ahead and essentially set and verify a particular artist's name based on an environment variable. So let's see what I have in here. You guys should notice here, this artist ID, I picked out this particular number. I've actually forgotten which artist this is, so we're going to find out together. But I was able to find someone and track them down here. But essentially what we're able to do is put in, I have the artist name is yes. Let's see. Oh, it's so mad. Oh, I wonder why. Okay, we'll find out. We will find out. So we have a search parameter of artist name. It's saying a 404 not found. Oh no, did you guys take down your beautiful fun API? Oh, so sad. It was just working a little bit ago. Oh, the sadness. Well, that also will happen with the publicly available free and for fun APIs. But essentially what you can do here is you can set, based on your pre-request script or anything else, a particular value for a variable, but you can also have tests that pull out those particular values, which is all I was going to show you here. But oh, that's so sad. I'm going to totally pull that up in another tab real quick and be like, what happened to you guys? Support us on Patreon. That might be a little bit different from last time. I probably need to pay something now to use them. But essentially that's really what's changing here. I'm going to take a look at my other requests and just see if any of the other guys work. No, everybody's mad. Yeah, I'll have to take a look and see. Well, I will fix this up for you guys if it's still available for free, and I'll let you know how we can use it. Let's see, what's the next one I have? Oh, National Weather Service. They're not going to let us down. Let's go ahead and take a look at those guys. All right, active alerts by state. Who doesn't want to hear about South Carolina weather? Oh, fantastic. So you can essentially get various weather alerts by state code. So here we go with our value. We're looking at this response here, and we've got all kinds of different features. There's certain alerts. We might pull up an alert in a browser and see what's going on there, get even more responses, all sorts of stuff going on, right? We can take a look at, let's see, they have a lot of geocode use. Unfortunately, I'm not like super duper familiar, but like it has like different zones that different alerts apply to. So this particular one, here we go. Finally, the meat and potatoes. The headline, special weather statement issued for December 2nd at 5 o'clock this morning. Continued dry conditions today. So we've got something we could extract if we wanted to. This particular API will also take a latitude and a longitude, which I was telling you guys earlier. I had some values here set in the environment level that I could use if I had like multiple requests that take that latitude and longitude, and I could use them in a couple of different ways. And we can get all this beautiful coordinate data, forecast data. So this will let you know other endpoints that you could hit to get hourly and station data, all sorts of stuff, depending on what you want to navigate within the weather world. And you've got a forecast office as well, just even more variables for yet another endpoint to get you even more data. Detailed forecast, sunny with a high near 71, west-southwest wind around 8 miles per hour. That's just to give you an idea that you can, of course, use your environment variables and have them apply as well. And then the last one, which I already showed you a little bit of, was Cocktail DB. I have some other ones in here as well that I'm still getting a little acclimated to just to see what they do. I can also show you the Poke API. So if you are a video game person or a Pokemon person, whatever you may call yourself, there is some wonderful creature out there has made an API endpoint that just lets you get information about Pokemon. So if I wanted information about a Butterfree, I have that right here as part of this endpoint here. This Pokemon endpoint accepts essentially this little variable right here. And I can get all these URLs for abilities, which version of the game it was in, all this sort of fun, silly nonsense, moves that it can learn. I'm going to see if I can open up one of these endpoints here and look in the browser, or I could just make another one. And actually this one is also, looks like it's got some different language people, but it's got all sorts of stuff to let you know, yeah, this is a move that it has in this version of the game, all sorts of nonsense. But what I found interesting is this also uses a different type of way that you can make lookups essentially with APIs. It's called GraphQL. And essentially you can create a query, and from that query, you can get all kinds of information that might be available through an API endpoint. So let's take a look here. I'm going to send this query that's like, hey, tell me about the generation 6 Pokemon. So which ones came out in the 6th generation of the Pokemon games? And here you go. It's got all these details and it lists out all these Pokemon and their ID numbers from that particular generation. But you can modify this query to change the order that the results come back in, or this generation, data, whatever it is that you would want to have as that information. You can also do aggregate and things like that. So you can think of it more like you're querying a database essentially, but you're doing it through an API. So this is fun, and I've only just started playing with this, but this is like a whole, generation of API technology there. All right, so the last one that I want to show you guys is the Postman Interceptor. So this is where we get to be real nosy about everybody else and what everybody else is doing. And we can absolutely not mind our own business and find out what are the requests that are going on. So this is a 2-piece setup to make this work. You're going to want to have the local Postman app installed. And then there's also this Chrome extension that you want to pick up that's called Postman Interceptor. And I have it up here. I already have it installed, so I can click on it. And you have this option to capture requests. So I have this toggled off right now because once it's on, it will take absolutely everything that's going on networking wise in your Chrome browser and make that part of the history in your local Postman app. So I'm going to do that right now. I know that I'm in a Google Docs presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and just change my tabs, make some things happen. And then in the Postman app, I'm going to go over here to history. Oh, look at all these docs.google.com requests. So we're going to find out what Google's been up to, see what some of the things are that it sends as part of, the presentation mode on a particular document. And you can see this like crazy bananas URL that it's got with all these different parameters going on. So you could poke around that way. It's also got all the header information here. So if there were other things that were going on, you could absolutely just poke around at that. If there was a body to the request, you can modify it and just go ahead and send it again. So there are lots of ways that you can use this to be very nosy and just poke at things that otherwise may or may not have documentation. So it's also just really a great fun way to see how other apps work. So you can just kind of take an eyeball to it and think about what it's sending and take a look at some of those things. Another way that you can take a look is simply to do the F12 on your browser and taking a look at your beautiful network tab. Let's see if this will let us see it here. Okay, so we can see some of the different requests that go in there. Show me like a request and a response. There we go. So there's like some stuff that's going on here. Not a whole lot going on while we're in the middle of presenting, but you of course could check this out if you were on a website with a lot more going on. But that's a spot where you can go. So if you have enjoyed any of the requests or things that we're poking around with today, the Postman Learning Center has a lot of great documentation. Inside the Postman app itself is also this really fun place that's called Explore. So you can find a lot of applications that have actually made a collection for their API, and you can just take a look at what they've actually built for the purpose of sharing. People actually like do fork off of it and do all sorts of fun stuff, you know, depending on what's out there. So you can find lots of different projects and things that people are doing this way and can take a look and learn very quickly that way. There's also, I included some sites here for the API list, Rapid API, and some other curated list here, just so you have some other things that you can play with and check out depending on what you enjoy. And that's it. That's my presentation, you guys.
Amazing job. This was so useful. I mean, I use Postman every day and learn so many things already, and I'm looking forward to playing around with some more stuff now that I know that there's so much more functionality.
Yay, I'm so glad. Fantastic. Here, I will stop the recording.